Okay, my name is Robel Seifemichael. I'm from the Environment and Climate Research Center of Policy Studies Institute. Today, I'm going to present a title which is Inclusive Green Economy, Forests versus Farms, and Striking a Sustainable Balance among these two competing objectives. So my presentation outline will look like there will be some kind of introduction, which discuss with forest and farms, about farms, showcases of farmland expansions, and the value of forests will be followed after that, and the importance of farms in the process, and the conflicts and challenge among these two competing objectives will be presented later. Then how do we reach towards a sustainable balance in the future will also follow next to the conflicts and challenge. Then at the end, we will see inclusive growth, empowering communities and the likes, and finally a way forward will be presented later. So as we all know that forest and farms have some kind of a complex relationships among them, that we all know that food security relies mostly on agricultural farmlands on which that the production will take place. On the other hand, forests provide crucial ecosystem services that can enhance the agricultural practices by itself in providing clean water, carbon sequestration, and biodiversity conservation in the process. However, these two objectives will somehow compete for land for agriculture, often which leads to deforestation and unsustainable practices in the process. Mostly in a global context, that 90% of deforestation was driven by an expansion of farmland, agricultural farmland, which is out of this, around 50% of these expansions are as a result of cropland expansion, according to FAO's 2022 report. So we will see some showcases from Ethiopia that can easily depict how farmlands are expanding into forested areas. So that as we can, over 2 decades of time, from 2002 up to 2022, that this is one of the area where farmland expansion is extensively practiced. Those dark greenish areas were the forest area that are longly cleared out by the agricultural farmland expansions, which is highlighted in a yellowish area in the period of 2022. As we can see, that there is an extensive farmland expansion into dense forested area was exhibited on one of the sites in Tigray, the northern part of the Ethiopia, where there is land cover changes intensively exhibited. As a showcase, the next showcase is an Adio district of southern nation and nationalities and peoples location, where land use cover change was also purely shown in those two periods, 2 decades of time, that in 2002, as you can see from the left side of the panel, that there is huge dense forested areas, but later after 2 decades of time that those dense forested areas were cleared out by farmland expansion. And thirdly, that the Oromia district, which is Adaba district of Oromia, we can see here also that the cases are somehow similar, that you can see from the left side, which is in 2002, that there is huge dense forested areas in the Adaba district of Oromia. But after 2 decades, those densely populated forests were cleared out by agricultural farmland expansion. So these 3 cases can show how the seriousness of the problem that we are facing in Ethiopia to show to the audiences that there should be some kind of way of managing these trade-offs in the process needs to be implemented. So let's see how forests are, how much they are valuable and or useful beyond that of the timber use. That it helps in carbon sequestration, that as we all know that forests are vital in carbon sinks, and also biodiversity conservations are also aligned with the forest conservation or forest use. So countless species are preserved in the forests areas. It also helps us in water regulation, maintaining water quality and availability, and also it prevents soil erosion in the process. So the other thing that we can get from the forest resources that it helps in the sustainability of the resources used, which helps majority of the livelihoods of less developed countries, mostly are relied on those forest resources. So it's beyond timber use is the forest, how much valuable is, we can see here from the slides previous that. According to the Global Forest Watch, the report of during the period from 2021 up to 2024, that about 99% of the tree losses in Ethiopia occurred within the natural forests. This is much significant amount of the forest was cleared out from the natural forest resources that we had during that period, which is equivalent to 84.1 megatons of carbon dioxide emission equivalent. So it is, as we can see from the graph, that it is increasingly depleted through the process. We can also see that from the period similar to that of the previous one, from the Global Forest Watch report, that from the period 2001 up to 2024, on average, 11 megaton of carbon dioxide emission equivalent per year is released to the atmosphere due to forest loss cover in Ethiopia. This is how this shows that how much significantly it affects the environment, that forest degradation affects each and every livelihood in the compound or in the universe. So on the other hand, we can also see how importance of farms feeding that the overgrowing population, that but it should be maintained in a sustainable manner, that it also needs to be feed the world responsibly. So it's clear that food security is one of the outcome or the results from the agricultural practices or farming practices, that it ensures the availability of nutritious food to all society. It maintains or upholds livelihoods of majority of millions of farmers and their families. It helps also somehow for a country, for instance, like Ethiopia, that economic growth is mainly dependent on the farming practices, that majority of the contribution to it's a major contributor to the GDP growth in many regions. It also helps in the sustainable farming, that minimizing environmental impacts through efficient technology adoptions and practices that are being implemented. However, most of the forest loss is associated with cropland expansion, according to different research findings, that there should be some kind of things needs to be done in the process. So we need to have to manage these conflicts and challenge and the trade-offs that arise between these two competing objectives, that farmland expansion and forest conservation, that we need to have to strike the price, the balance in between them. So the price of imbalance between these two competing objectives is that deforestation driven by agricultural expansion, so loss of biodiversity due to this habitat destruction can happen in the process, soil degradation and water pollution from intensive farming practices. And those all above 3 points that are combinedly affect the climate change impacts, affecting both forests and farms at hand. So this jointly creates social inequalities related to land access and resource allocation in the process. So these are some of the examples that can be presented in the photograph attached below, that it shows how intensive the land clearing and farmland expansion affects farmland forest conservation practices. So how do we reach towards a sustainable balance and get solution and strategies out of this? So one of the main things that we need to have is harmonizing forest and farms activities through agroforestry, integrating the trees into farming practices or farming systems so that they can align with each other. So it helps, one helps the other, and the other also helps back the first one. And the sustainable land management practices, that it helps in preventing soil erosion, water resource scarcity, and the likes. And the third point is that community-based forest management can also be applied through different initiatives so that it helps in empowering local communities to maintain those natural forests and conserve the environment. The other important thing is application of climate-smart agricultures, caution that we need to align this objective with some guidelines and so on, because farmers may motivated further to expand their farmlands due to an incentive they get from more production through the process. So even though it enhances the productivity, we should be kept cautious about its effect on the size of the farmland expansion to be considered. So jointly, all this needs to be coherent, or policy coherence is one of the best solution to this kind of trade-offs to be managed, that agriculture, forestry, and economic policies must be aligned together so they can work one for the other and back and forth. So this coherences will lead to effective and efficient way of managing this trade-off. So promoting sustainable practices through regulations and incentives will also help in minimizing these farmland expansion practices across the countries. So inclusive growth and empowering communities can also be applied to manage this trade-off between these two competing objectives, because there are winners and there are also losers from this farmland expansion in the process. Those who expand will gain some benefits in the short run. However, they might lose those gains in the long run, because this can be correlated to the climate issues. So even though some of them are also lose their gains in the short run, they will also again lose mostly on the long run due to climate effects. So how do we manage this trade-off? So we can share the benefits across the system, that fair compensation for ecosystem services can be implemented, and support for smallholder farmers can also be used so that they can compensate the system through this kind of incentives. Investing in education and training for sustainable practices is another option that we can share the benefits to the communities. And promoting access to technology and resources will also enhance to manage this trade-off. And the other important thing is ensuring equitable access to land and resource will be used to manage the inclusivity of the growth and empowering communities. So in the near future, how do we look forward to manage these trade-offs between this farmland expansion and forest conservation? So we need to build a resilient future in the near future, so that a sustainable balance between forest and farmers must be implemented or must be considered as an essential point. And the other important thing we need to consider in the future is that inclusive green economies should require collaboration and innovation, so that new technologies and new innovations can help to enhance and resolve this kind of conflicts among this farmland expansion and forest conservation. And the other important thing is that strengthening legal frameworks for forest protection. So we need to be put in place that legal frameworks that can guide and enhance the use of how to use and protect forest resources should be implemented. The other important thing is promoting sustainable agricultural practices and integrating land use planning with across sectors in collaboration with. These are some of the ways forward, and investing in sustainable practices which benefits both people and the planet itself. So all these things are currently existing things that we can easily apply for, but we need to continue research and monitoring activities that there might be some kind of way of doing things that can resolve this kind of trade-offs will be at hand at some point. So all this is my presentation, and I thank you.